that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Segregated schools were and are inferior schools. We still haven't fixed them 50 years after Brown versus Board of Education. And the inferior education they provided, then and now, helps explain the pervasive achievement gap between today's black and white students.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
When we take those tests, even when black and Latino students score at the top of the distribution, so even when black and Latino students do very well using the biased and absurd indicators that we use in this country, they're still 40% less likely to be put into an advanced placement class or an honors class in high school than white students who scored in the middle of the distribution. So you have average white students, according to this criteria, and of course the criteria is bogus, but understand it's the one we use. Using this criteria, white students who are merely average are still more likely to have advanced or accelerated classes once they get to high school. Now what does that mean? It means that those students are going to get more prepared for the SAT, right? They're going to get more prepared for the ACT, they're going to take the test, and they're going to do better. And we're going to act shocked when people of color do worse on a test that they were systemically excluded from preparing for, as if that is a surprise. I mean, black and Latino students of whatever socioeconomic status, 2.5 times more likely than whites to be put into remedial classes, where they're not going to receive the same instruction, they're not going to have the same coursework, they're not going to be challenged in the same way, right? And so we then act surprised when in 11th grade they take the SAT, the ACT, they don't do as well, and then our society says, well, now you're not capable of going on to college, or at least not that college, because you're not as smart as somebody else over here. The fact that the structure of the educational system guaranteed that you would not do as well, virtually assured it, is something we don't want to talk about. But that's the systemic issue.
And I really view education as the civil rights fight of our generation, that we have a moral obligation to do something dramatically better for children and to do it now. Our children have one chance at a quality education, and if we don't provide it, I think we perpetuate poverty, we perpetuate social failure. So this is an extraordinary opportunity, but this is a fight to me that's about a lot more than education. It's really a fight for social justice. It's the right thing to do for children. It's the right thing to do for our economy. If we want to continue to grow as a country, we need an educated workforce. And so this is a huge opportunity, but I want to work with a huge sense of urgency as fast as we can. Our children need and deserve it, and our country needs it.
Discrimination in the classroom. Danny Fiola, Emily Brees, Nicole Bolton, and Leanne Osta. The Department of Justice's stance is as followed. The Civil Rights Division Educational Opportunities Section enforces several federal civil rights laws which prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, language, sex, religion, and disability in schools and colleges. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the landmark legislation prohibiting discrimination in several areas, including housing, employment, and education. The sections of the Act relating to education are Title IV, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, or national origin by public elementary and secondary schools and public institutions of higher learning. Title VI, prohibiting discrimination by recipients of federal funds on the basis of race and national origin. And Title IX, permitting the United States to intervene in pending suits alleging discrimination. Additionally, the Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 prohibits deliberate segregation on the basis of race, color, and national origin. The educational opportunities section works to ensure that all persons, regardless of their sex, are provided equal educational opportunities. The section's work includes addressing sex-based discrimination and harassment, including discrimination and harassment based on not conforming with gender stereotypes, sexual harassment, and adequate athletic participation opportunities for students. Title IV of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 also prohibits discrimination on the basis of religion in public schools and colleges. The Educational Opportunities section works to ensure that all persons, regardless of their religion, are provided equal educational opportunities. The section's work includes addressing discrimination and harassment on the basis of religion and spans all religious affiliations. However, discrimination still happens. Black and Latino students across the United States are far more likely to be suspended than white students and are far less likely to have access to rigorous college prep courses. In discipline, overall, African American students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white peers. And 70% of students arrested or referred to law enforcement for disciplinary infractions are Black or Latino, the study found. Other researchers have found that students who are repeatedly punished by being barred from campus are far more likely to drop out. There is racial bias in tests. Average test scores of Black students trail those of white students, not just because of economic disadvantages, but because some parts of the test result in differential scores by race for students of equal academic prowess. This is extremely significant as many colleges continue to rely on the SAT scores. Therefore, access to higher education at institutions and subsequent job placement and professional success appear to be biased against African Americans and other minority groups. There's gender bias in the classroom. Gender bias occurs when people make assumptions regarding behaviors, abilities, or preferences of others based upon their gender. Because there are strong gender role stereotypes for masculinity and femininity, students who do not match them can encounter problems with teachers and with their peers. Teachers tolerate more calling out from boys than from girls. Boys call out answers when the teacher does not call on them, 8 times more often than girls do. Teachers often respond to boys calling out, thus reinforcing the behavior. When girls call out, however, teachers are more likely to remind them that they are not following the class rules. In one area, females usually receive more attention than boys, is the physical appearance. Girls receive compliments more often than boys on their clothing, hairstyle, and overall appearance. This emphasis on appearance also influences how their schoolwork is evaluated. Girls receive praise for neatness, while boys receive recognition for academic achievements. There is also sexual orientation discrimination inside the classroom. Approximately 28% of gay and lesbian youth drop out of high school because of discomfort due to verbal and physical abuse in the school environment. Furthermore, they do not get involved in much student activities and have little dedication to the school's agendas because school is not a safe, healthy, or productive learning environment. Therefore, LGBT youths make an attempt to live, work, and learn with continuous fear of physical assault at school. Here's a quote. Educators cannot ignore the risk faced by homosexual students, but deciding how to deal with the issue should be a matter of local concern. Meaning, teachers cannot simply just ignore what is going on. They have to address the issues. So as you can see, there's plenty of discrimination still going on in the classroom, even though the Department of Justice has a section entirely dedicated to preventing this.
I think it depends a lot on the public school system itself. I think there are still systems that have a lot of overt, bigoted discrimination, but most of that has fallen by the wayside. I think some of the discriminations that occur now are more along the lines of the assumptions that students can't do something. For instance, in science, which is what I'm familiar with, the idea that girls don't do science. And a lot of that is, I think it's very covert. A teacher may not even be aware that they approach people that way. Or the discriminations that occur because teachers assume students have resources that they don't have. They assume that, okay, all the students have access to the internet, all the students have access to all of these materials. Those areas of discrimination are areas that still occur that we really need to be on the lookout, in addition to the more overt, ugly stuff. I think in my experience right now, students who are not of means, who are not wealthy, or who aren't even middle class on the outside, I think there are a lot of teachers and administrators that don't understand the prevalence of this condition, that these things can cause major issues, and therefore teachers will make very poor assumptions, discriminatory assumptions about the students. And again, gender or even ethnicity-based assumptions about people's ability to do certain subjects, like math and science. There are still underlying, I think, issues with certain teachers that they make that assumption. And that's something that we need to be on guard against. As far as overt discrimination, the students have a fairly strong tendency to discriminate against each other. And whether they're carrying their parents' baggage into the classroom, they have their own parents' bigoted ideas about who people are. I think a lot of students, the majority of what I see is there. But again, there are a lot of teachers who still make assumptions about who a student is based on appearance and on what their own background is. I know of older male teachers, like I've said before, that they don't adequately question female students in class, in science classes, because they have this weird assumption that female students can't do science, which is utter crap, but it's there. Administrators, it tends not to be out in the open, and I think the place that shows up in terms of discrimination with administrators is when administrators don't take an active role in making sure that there are policies in place that prevent this kind of discrimination. Districts can make sure that there are policies in place that directly address these types of issues that aren't obvious. There are usually things in place that prevent overt, bigoted discrimination based on race or ethnicity or sexual preference. But there are less policies in place that make it clear that being discriminatory in terms of a student's ability to get resources or who they are in terms of what they can learn. On a district level, having policies in place that directly assess that, or that directly look at that. The other thing is that there needs to be a constant monitoring by the staff themselves of each other. I believe strongly in, and not as part of a district evaluation procedure, but that peer reviews of each other, science teachers reviewing the other science teachers, watching. How do they learn? How do they teach? How do they interact with the students? What do they do? And being free to do that with each other makes you a better teacher. Teachers who are free to be honest with each other, saying, hey, and I noticed in class you're questioning the students. You didn't ask a single question of a Hispanic student, okay? You let all the white and Asian kids answer all of the questions. Having that pointed out to you, because people may be unaware they do that. That's something that's in there that they don't understand that they do. And so, you know, having district policies in place, having teachers be able to evaluate and review each other and have in-service available that addresses these things is really important. 10 years ago, things have gotten better. It doesn't mean we don't need to be on the lookout for it constantly, but, and this sounds a little bit harsh, I know, but as some of the older teachers retire or die out, they're replaced by younger teachers who have a tendency to not have some of the same dinosaur attitudes that a lot of the older teachers have had. I think that we're getting better at addressing these issues, we're getting better at looking at them, but I think we run a danger of complacency in thinking we have it all solved, and we don't. But in all honesty, I think things are better now, and mostly due to the fact that younger teachers are taking the place of some of the crustier, old, set in their ways teachers. There needs to be a clear district policy on discrimination, on what it means to discriminate and what potential consequences for discrimination should be. And then within the classroom, I think teachers need training in how to be aware of the different subtle forms of discrimination that students will exhibit towards each other. And teachers need to be constantly vigilant and listening and watching to see what's going on in their classroom. And the biggest thing I think that we can do is on the level of a teacher, being aware of what's going on and addressing it when there is an issue. If there's an issue, it comes up, you address it. And you address it in terms of what's right, not necessarily, even if the district doesn't have a policy, you do need to address it because this is what is right for the students.
Unified school district?
There is. There has been in the past. It's right now, general district in-services have been a little bit rare for a while just because the funding has all been funneled towards curriculum, and particularly recently Common Core. But as part of Common Core, I don't see any issue why some of that can't and shouldn't be, because it should be part of it, be brought up. It has been a large part of what we've done in the past. Currently, it's not as much.
Now, this is just from your own personal experience. Have you ever come across a situation where a student felt discriminated in your classroom? And if so, how did you handle the situation? And you can use code names if you want.
No. One of my favorite circumstances, and it wasn't when I taught in Claremont. It was in a school district where my students were predominantly Black and Hispanic. And I had a student who was getting particularly frustrated with how he was doing, and in the middle of class he finally blew up, stood up, and accused me of being a racist. And I was very fortunate in that I really didn't have to, at least at that point. We had a talk later, but I didn't have to deal with it right away because the students in class dealt with it by basically just busting out laughing. They were dying laughing that a student would accuse me of being a racist, because that had never been their experience. None of the other students had done that. And they basically said, you need to sit down. You're really not making any sense at all. And that's really the only one, the circumstance that I've ever been accused of discrimination. And again, it was by a student who was experiencing a great deal of frustration, and I think he just sort of snapped.
Yeah.
And the other students dealt with it for me. So.
Have there